Well, economists will be keeping an eye on the markets over this election period. The polls come amid slowing economic growth and after South Africa just missed a ratings downgrade recently, with three major metros in close contention in this municipal election. How, if at all, will it affect our economy? Let's discuss this now with Martyn Davies. He's the Managing Director of Emerging Markets and Africa for Deloitte Frontier Advisory. Martyn, good morning and thanks for your time.
Good morning. Good to be here.
You know, it's not a general election. You wouldn't expect that a local government election will be watched by investors, will have an impact on the economy. Are we expecting that this election, being touted as our biggest, our most hotly contested, will have an impact?
We seem to be, South Africans were over-politicized as a society to begin with. I think, of course, it's seen as a litmus test of how the ruling parties, being the ANC, has been sort of viewed. I think perhaps we're perhaps too sensitive, especially at a macro global level, domestically, in saying, well, will this rock the markets? Is it a heightened political risk? I tend to discount that. I mean, look at a more global level. Look what happened in Turkey a couple of weeks ago, a full-on military coup d'etat, and it hasn't really affected emerging market sentiment. Quite the opposite. So I think it'll be certainly very impactful on domestic business confidence, but global business confidence, I would even call it the blip, to be honest.
So you don't think that it's going to make much of a difference? I mean, we're looking at terms like the risk narrative for investors. What is that?
I think that's a bit of exaggerated, if you ask me. I think it's more about sort of, unless there's some extreme outcomes from this election, which I certainly doubt. I think it's more of the same, to be honest.
Now, when we look at things like service delivery, we look at the protests we've had, we look at the issues that people are experiencing when it comes to service delivery. When people abroad or investors look at parts of the country burning, does it not raise some alarm for them? Does it not cause some panic? Have you seen that in the past couple of months?
We have, and what concerns me is a recent report by eNCA, the United Nations Conference Trade and Development, about a month or two ago, came out. Detailing last year's FDI, foreign direct investment into the country. It's the lowest point in the last 20 odd years, $1.8 billion US. Now, of course, having such a low levels of FDI, even compared to our peer emerging market economies, is very concerning. What's the cause of this? It talks to perhaps non-tariff barriers in South Africa. It talks to a lack of confidence. It talks to a lack of growth, and perhaps concerns about policy that the current government has. So I think, again, this could just reinforce that potentially. But this is not a market immediately reactive thing. It's a long sort of process. How do we break that cycle? How do we create more positivity in the system? We look towards India, perhaps. India 2 years ago had this political shift, the Modi moment, so to speak, and amongst many emerging markets, think Brazil, think South Africa, think Russia, think Malaysia potentially right now. And there's a lot of negativity. There are a couple standing out, and India is certainly one of them, 7.5% growth. I mean, the real confidence provider beyond politics in South Africa, I think, will be growth. What should we as an economy really be growing at? 4%, 5%? Why not 6%? But we're stuck in this low or no growth trap, exactly that, where we just can't select a gear. So if we had some good growth in the system, not just globally enabled through more positive capital flow in emerging markets, which is starting to happen, but how do we domestically engineer our own growth? And that's what none of us in this country seemingly can agree on.
Okay, so it doesn't come down to the local government level when it comes to that, but what we're looking at and what observers are looking at is, what is it saying when we look at the political killings that we're seeing around the country, when we look at what many are saying are the cracks starting to show in the ANC, which is our governing party? Is that not something that will get investors maybe thinking as well, long term,
again,
between now and 2019?
It feeds into the general negative sentiment. You can't have ruling parties literally, what I read in the press, assassinating fellow members, and this is just unacceptable by any standard, of course. And it does feed into the negativity domestically and from abroad as well, perhaps. But again, we tend to be more critical of a situation you know more about, and that's obviously being domestically in South Africa. We know far more about our society than others do. But this negative news, of course, is the last thing our country needs, particularly in difficult times like now.
So what will the decisions, if anything, what will the people who are put in place, whether they are councillors, whether they are the mayors, what impact, if anything, how does that lead up to what this does for our economy, if anything, when we make our mark tomorrow? What should we
I think ultimately, you're talking about a municipal, local level elections. Ultimately, the emerging market story, of which we are part, we hope, is a governance story. Whatever we can do at local levels, at national level, whatever level in this country, as we start to incrementally, hopefully, improve governance, that feeds into a better story. We had this before in South Africa. We've had it rewinding, 15, 20 years or so. We need to recapture that. This is not a shock moment, not through elections. It's a gradual process.
So it impacts the story, not the numbers, is what we say.
Correct. I think it's well put.
Okay, thanks very much. That's Martyn Davies, Managing Director of Emerging Markets and Africa for Deloitte Frontier Advisory.